You're watching News at Prime. Let's get into a completely different conversation now. And we are talking about the Afrikaner groups that are calling for the establishment of geographically based special cultural zones. They claim that government has failed to cater for their needs, and this is as a minority group. And as the country marks 30 years of democracy, we're asking the question, is this in line with the advancement of the democratic project? And joining me for this conversation is the Orania Movement head, Joost Strydom, and we're also joined by Solidarity's Werner. Gentlemen, to both of you, thank you very much for your time. I want to start with you, Werner, because the understanding is that there is this call from the Afrikaner community for more geographically based special cultural zones for Afrikaners. What exactly is this about?
Thank you, Collie, and good evening to all the viewers this evening. This is a call that also stems from many other calls. I don't know if you know this, but last week we released what we call an Afrikaner statement with 12 points, what we say that we as Afrikaners need in this country. We also declare our bona fides in this country as a cultural community, one of many cultural communities that say we want to have a sustainable existence in this country. We send a strong message to say that we are here to stay, but we want to help also. Yeah. We say we are here to stay, not to merely live here, but to contribute, and with that comes responsibility. But in order to exercise that responsibility, there must be certain cultural freedoms. Remember, we are a cultural group, which is a minority, and it means that for those cultural freedoms, many of those things are listed in that statement, and one of those is most definitely geographical area where we can exercise those. That claim stems directly, all 12 statements actually, stems directly from the Constitution and the constitutional framework, and it's also in accordance with international norms and standards. And this is actually a participation in democracy. Many people see the perception to say that when you endeavor and when you pursue these cultural freedoms that you don't want to be part or you don't want to live with other people, but it's exactly the opposite. Yeah. It is there in order for you to participate in a democratic country, to participate in your own affairs. And we say that is actually normal, and that should be normalized in the public discourse as well.
Joost, let's come to you. Orania was established almost at the same time as the fall of apartheid. Remind us of the reasons that motivated for the existence of this Afrikaner community.
Thank you. Yes, just an important correction. Orania is established both before the end of apartheid and before the establishment of the new South Africa. And the idea, the Orania idea, growing from groups like Afstig and Sabra, is an idea as old as the 70s. It's not a new idea. It's a new way of life, but it's not a new idea. It's a well-established third option. Afrikaners who said 50 years ago already that the current regime is not sustainable and will not last, as well as the fact that they are looking for a more ethical, long-term solution for Afrikaners to have their own space where they can truly call it home, and where they can create and establish institutions that serve them. Orania is, in the past 30 years, although still a young community in that sense, in the context of nations, Orania is a community that, while small, has proven itself to build up established institutions like growing energy independence, like establishing relationships with other communities across the board without using the state or without the state as a middleman. We did not need government to go out and speak to other cultural groups. We did not need government to create our community, our municipality. We did it without any state financial incentive. We did it with all hard work and with funds that we raised ourselves. And it's a proof, it's a living proof for other communities who also feel that the current government is failing them that the government is not even at this stage properly able to deliver services across the board.
Yeah.
And it's time for communities to take control of their own destiny. And that is the message that Orania has had for the past 30 years and that we shared with other groups as well.
Werner, you have heard from Joost there. Part of the reasoning why Orania was established was that this current regime, the democratic government, in other words, would not last. These are some of the words he has said. How different is your call for more geographic special cultural zones to the project of Orania?
Collie, I think Joost also referred to the previous regime that was unsustainable. And that means that you have to look for options on your own. The reason why this is an important call as well is that this is much more a normalized idea than one would think. If you look at the country, we have more than 20 million people today living under traditional authorities. You've got the Inkonyama Trust, and the Zulu Kingdom also made a strong statement in relation to that regard. And it's not because you pursue this, it's not because merely there's a failure in centralized government. It is, even with a well-functioning government, you will have these ideals. And the idea is that when there are matters that affect you most and are closest to home, it is only normal that you can have a say in those affairs. A version of democratic South Africa should not mean simple majoritarianism. The writer Alexis de Tocqueville, he wrote about the tyranny of the majority, meaning that you have a majority that only pursues their own goals and their own objectives. This is a way in order to participate in affairs that affect you. And important to note further is that to run your own affairs and to live in a country like we do, it's not two contradictory statements. It's not one or the other. We also believe that you can have multiple identities. I'm an Afrikaner, but I'm also a Christian. I'm a father. I live in South Africa. I carry many different identities. I'm also part of a language community, an Afrikaans language community. And this enriches the democracy. And why this opportunity we have this evening, and also with this statement, we also seek to pursue and address those perceptions that you address and some of your viewers might have.
Yeah. Werner, before I move on from you, perhaps a much simpler question for people to understand exactly whether the two of you are of the same thought process. Do you support the existence of communities like Orania?
Absolutely. If you look at our broader movement, the solidarity movement on which I'm employed with, we've got many institutions within our movement. AfriForum, the Solidarity, we've got a few educational institutions, and one of the core work that we do is on ground level, in Koli. We have local government involvement where we work with every community that they're there, because if we can fix a road and we can fix waterworks, it's not only for the benefit of our members there, it's for benefit of all in the community. And we've got agricultural projects with many of these communities that I've mentioned, and we have harvest in the next 2 years. We have a good harvest that we found with them, and we've got projects together. So we are actually actioning those ideals that we've mentioned. It's not merely talk that we are doing here. We can show examples on where in the Eastern Cape, where in the Free State, where we've done these projects jointly, and we do so on the basis of mutual recognition and respect, and we've got many success in that regard. And that's why Joost also mentions to say that ultimately we hope that this would be an example of how people can have more say in their own affairs and work together on a basis of mutual recognition and respect.
Yeah. Joost, this is a conversation that you and I would have had many moons ago, before I came to this specific channel. And it's a question that is premised on the assumptions from people that Orania is a racist community. But at that time that you welcomed me into your community, you said, no, this is not about racism. This is about preserving the existence of the Afrikaner community. However, the question arose whether if a black person, but who sees themselves and who practices Afrikaner culture, would that person be welcomed into Orania?
Tolly, I think that's a question. That's a question that Orania gets a lot, and the reason why is there's always kind of an assumption that Orania is trying to keep something behind the curtains and show a specific facade to the world, whilst simultaneously managing our community as is in some kind of a racist veil. The truth is that Orania get many guests from across the board, and being in the media the past year and leading up to the elections, there was many visitors from around the world, including South Africans, including Black South Africans, who've been accepted and warmed very welcomely in Orania. However, in terms of identity, in terms of Orania identity, in terms of Afrikaner identity, a community like this is unapologetically an Afrikaner community. It seems like there's always this checklist where people want to say, if I do this, and that, but I have a black skin, am I Afrikaner then? And the truth is that I've never met someone who truly described himself as an Afrikaner, who truly celebrated the Day of the Vow, which is a public holiday in Orania, Geloftedag. Important part of Afrikaner history when, an important battle that we had, and other cultural holidays in Orania. I simply had visits from other traditional communities who enjoyed their time in Orania, but very clearly celebrated their own culture. So we always speak in theoretical terms. We always speak like, if this, that, and that is the case, is a person then an Afrikaner? But never has such a person been asked, well, are you an Afrikaner? Do you even want to live in Orania? And I think the fact is, it's not beating around the bush. We are quite clear about it. Orania is an Afrikaner community. Afrikaners have a shared heritage, a shared culture, shared language, shared religion, and so much more. So I think theoretical games doesn't make much sense if they really aren't any applicants, bona fide applicants, coming to Orania and saying, listen, I really am an Afrikaner. And then finally, a final part of this question is to say a cultural community, an honest cultural community, like a Zulu person or a Xhosa person or an Afrikaner, works from two ways. It comes from self-identification, and we live in an area of self-identification where many people identify as many things. But it also comes if the group identifies you as that culture, as that identity.
All right.
So in terms of an era where gender and I almost want to say race and culture and everything is so fluid, Orania makes a statement that comes from two sides. On the one hand, you yourself, the way you identify, but also if the group sees you that way. And then we have our relationships with traditional communities is such a beautiful and such a proper thing for one simple reason. We recognize the people for who they are and the way they want to be recognized, the traditional communities of the Barulong, the Amabele, and Mnyameni, and they recognize us for what we are, Afrikaners.
Okay. You're watching News at Prime, and we are wrapping up a conversation with the Afrikaner groups that are calling for more of what they say is a geographic special cultural zones that must be given to the Afrikaner community. Let's come to you, Werner. Now, it's quite interesting that you say that you support the existence of communities like Orania. You heard Joost that as much as he says they have never met a black person who says that they identify as Afrikaner, but one of the statements that struck me about what he said was that that person, though, has also they've got to be accepted by the Afrikaner community as being one of their own. The reason I'm saying that I'm struck by this is that you come from the recently established, or you are part of the recently established Afrikaner Leadership Network. And part of the pledge that you said you wanted to get out for South Africans to understand, and I'm going to quote directly from this particular pledge, is that you are saying the past must not destroy the future of all of us. We endorse unity in diversity. How will you respond to a person who says, on the one hand, you want to be part of the South African diverse nation, but on the other hand, you want this almost exclusive community, and sometimes they call it an enclave? That's a contradiction, is it not?
It is not a contradiction, Colleen. Those 12 statements, and I'm glad you've read them, it's a statement that takes into context everything we have in the country. It takes into context the diversity that we have, and it takes into the context what the Constitution allows for and what not. The space on which we focus on tonight is a geographical space, and it should not be interpreted as Afrikaners wanting to claim that they own. It's a space available for each community to do so. Everyone can do so, but it is within bounds of within the Constitution. And as Joost also mentioned, there's no criteria, and race is not a criteria. I think it was the first president of Israel, Ben-Gurion, who said that the Jewish community is a community that lived for thousands of years with no criteria or no definition. So we don't work with definitions, but we believe that when there's a cultural community that can do the good work and work land on their own and get ultimately a space where they can be, to an extent, self-sufficient, that is not contradictory. Many of these communities are very close to the ground. They've got good relations with other communities as well. So there's no contradiction there. I might also just say, when we say an exclusive place for Afrikaners, it doesn't mean that each and every Afrikaner in this country today, that we all agree on the same points in the exact same manner. And we don't have a problem with that at all. You have Afrikaners today that say, I do not support at all any form of geographical space, and that is okay too. Then you get Afrikaners who say, I can afford this right and this space to other communities, and I can believe that it's a good right to establish those spaces. However, I won't ever live there, and that's fine too. So we do not say that we want a full unity, and each one of Afrikaners feel like that, but a significant portion say this is what they want to do, and this is what is allowed. So I don't think it's a contradiction in terms, and I think we can also see in practice that that it doesn't prove that fact as well.
Joost, as we conclude this conversation, how would you respond to a critic who says the Afrikaner community cannot possibly be wanting more land or more of this geographical, special economic or special cultural zones, that you're looking for, when it already has so much land in its hands? And if anything, what if they say that the existence of Orania is based on what the Constitution of South Africa allows for, which is the article on self-determination? Would you challenge that if the government of the day said they wanted to amend that in order to dismantle Orania?
First of all, the critics aren't referring to land in Afrikaners as a group's hands. They are referring to individuals owning individual land in a free market society. Show me, I can show you where the Zulus have their land, their space, which is rightful theirs. Where's the place which is the Afrikaners, which is the Afrikaners as a groups? We don't have any space that is ours. Individuals own land, yes, but if you look statistically and scientifically at the landmass of South Africa, Afrikaners do not have the majority of land. That's not the truth. It's a false statement. So that would not be true. It would be a true reflection of fact. Afrikaners deserve a place, and we understand that we deserve a place only if we can work it ourselves with our own labor, as we do in Orania, and if we can live and work it in those terms. Anyone who tries to dismantle Article 235 of the Constitution clearly have no other intention of as denying Afrikaners a space. As you've seen with this Afrikaner declaration, and as you've seen with Orania's good track record over the past 30 years, we are not here to be aggressive against anyone. We are not challenging people. We are simply taking up a space for ourselves, rightfully so, in terms of constitutionally guaranteed rights. And not only constitutionally guaranteed, also in international law and, in the way the world works. But if someone challenges that and they want to amend that part of the Constitution, they are denying not only Afrikaners, but all cultural groups, all minorities in South Africa, the right to have their own space. And that is only someone with very bad intentions that would do that. That is not what you earlier called unity and diversity. It's denying people the right to the diversity that they want to live. We have the right to live our diversity. Our diversity is being Afrikaners. Right. And in a greater context, we will not be denied that right.
Joost Strydom, the head of Orania Movement, thank you very much for your time and contribution to this discussion. Werner from Solidarity, thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you, colleague.
All right. And this is where we end it for this Wednesday edition of News at Prime. In Focus, up next with Tawam.